Nigerian Army in general is making efforts to train its personnel. This has become necessary in view of the security challenges and demand for security. You must therefore remain resolute and sustain the tempo of training and other regimental activities.
And at the 2017 Nigerian Army Small Arms Competition, President Muhammadu Buhari assured Nigerians that no section or territory of the country will ever be occupied by terrorists. The competition is holding in Sambisa Forest, Borno State. Our correspondent Ismail Musa reports that the Chief of Army Staff and others at the event reiterated the commitment to further secure the territory.
Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship is an army-level championship designed to assess as well as enhance proficiency of Nigerian Army personnel in weapon handling and marksmanship.
This championship is not only sharpen the marksmanship of the Nigerian Army personnel, but it will also instill the desired confidence and determination to achieve excellence.
Away from security matters now, the Senate President Bukola Saraki and Senator Dino Melaye have appeared before the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges to defend various allegations against them. Bukola Saraki was accused of importing a bulletproof SUV car without valid documents, while Senator Melaye was accused of forging a certificate without obtaining a first degree from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. Both allegations, which are circulating in the social media, were brought through a point of order by former Senate leader Ali Ndume. While testifying before the Committee on Ethics, the Senate President denied the allegation of importing or having anything to do with the vehicle in contention.
I'm not an importer. At no time did I import any SUV Range Rover. As you know, this is a vehicle that is not a personal vehicle, a vehicle that was processed through the National Assembly. I don't know anything about the importation. I didn't appoint any clearing agent or anything like that. Like most of the vehicles that are here, you only know when it's delivered to you.
The federal government says there is no plan to extend the 6 weeks time frame for the reopening of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, and the Minister of State for Aviation, Hadi Sirika, restated this in Lagos at an interactive session with members of the Aviation Round Table.
Let me use this opportunity to debunk the erroneous report making the rounds that the closure of the Abuja Airport has been extended by 18 weeks. This is not true.
I'm very, very comfortable that we will be able to achieve this 6 weeks target. To arrive to 6 weeks, I know the tremendous amount of work and thought process that we've gone through.
Meanwhile, handlers of rehabilitation work on the runway of the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, have assured Nigerians of meeting the deadline for the completion of repair works at the airport. It was during an inspection of the runway by the House Committee on Aviation, which expressed concern over what it considered slow pace of work and impossibility of meeting the deadline.
Nigerians are concerned that we wouldn't want any extension and we want them to give us a perfect job based on the agreement that we have reached. They said it's total resurfacing. So when we come to the board, they have to explain to us the level of implementation to what they signed.
Laying of asphalt doesn't take much of a time. It's the milling. When you mill and you see a bad areas, you just definitely have to stop, do the preparations, then before you continue. We finish within 3 weeks. We have a program, and we are following that program.
Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Babachir David Lawal, says the present administration will continue to work towards ensuring that government businesses are done in more positive ways. This was at the opening of the first National Policy Dialogue on Strategies for Improving Service Delivery in Government Parastatals, Agencies and Commissions.
In order to ensure the provision of essential services that meet the aspirations and expectations of the public, there must be shared responsibility, accountability, and synergy in the public service structure that is charged with the responsibility of implementing it.
We're going to see a lot of these changes. One thing we'll definitely be seeing is that there will be an enforcement of rules and regulations.
Well, that's the news for now. The program continues with Blessing and Kingsley after this break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
What makes a Niger mom powerful?
I encourage my kids to learn new things. And if they get hurt, I rely on the power of my Dettol's One Capful. To fight germs, it's like my own first aid kit.
My family needs protection from germs. I use the power of Dettol's One Capful to disinfect surfaces and clothes to keep them clean and safe from germs.
I trust the power of Dettol's One Capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's One Capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Millions of powerful Niger moms use the power of Dettol's One Capful to protect their families. Be a powerful Niger mom with Dettol. Be 100% sure.
Before, Usan had very, very difficult. Before, now, on our way with that guy 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, on our plan, Abalaga, Lawa Lule. But government very well rescue mission. The Mepela, Yadema. In a way that it will take Pike, Yana, Motato, we can buy no Chapa, but the show and never who's a wobbler.
This is a rescue mission project. Invest in IMO. The IMO Rescue Mission. IMO must be better.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Time now for the business report of the day. Naira receives steam as the Apex Bank orders banks not to exceed 360 Naira in exchange for the dollar. And the federal government says it is working to improve the business climate in the country. Let's find out more details with Leah Katumba Batunde.
The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has released the sum of $85 million for sale to deposit money banks at the rate of 357 Naira per dollar for onward sale to retail end users at not more than 360 Naira per dollar for invisibles such as basic travel allowance, BTAs, medicals, and school fees. The bank on Monday, March 27, also offered the sum of $100 million to authorize forex dealers in the interbank wholesale window to meet the request of genuine wholesale customers. Disclosing these, the bank's acting director in charge of corporate communications, Isaac Okoroafo, said the rates in the interbank window for wholesale transactions will still be determined by activities in the interbank market. Furthermore, he disclosed that all banks had also been directed to immediately post the new rate on electronic display boards in the banking halls of their branches, adding that examiners from the CBN would visit banks to ensure the new rates are implemented. The CBN spokesman also reiterated the bank's directive to all banks to process and meet the demand for travel allowances by end users within 24 hours of such application, while applications for school fees and medical bills are to be met within 48 hours of such application. Okorafor warned that the new move aimed at further easing access of genuine end users to Forex prohibited banks from selling foreign exchange funds meant for invisibles to bureau de change. Going forward, he reiterated that all banks would receive amounts commensurate with their demands per week, which would be sold to customers who meet the usual basic documentary requirements. He therefore urged customers to report any erring bank to the CBN for investigation and appropriate sanctions. What is the projection of Nigeria's investment climate in line with the ease of doing business? Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment Okechukwu Enaloma in this interview with Cliff Ayoze gives an insight into government's projection.
The process of building a nation is a long-term one, of which 5 years may not be sufficient, but you can do a lot in 5 years. And our objective is to make sure that Nigeria in 5 years is an attractive country to do business in, where, like you said, the foreign direct investment is coming in. And the domestic investors are also happy to invest in their own country. We're also working to make sure that we restore market confidence, investor confidence, business confidence in a way that people will see Nigeria as an attractive place to do business.
Nigeria is currently ranked 170 out of 189 countries in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business. Meanwhile, the Nigerian stock market resumed the week upbeat as major indicators pointed northward. Next is a graphic summary. With Business News, I'm Lekatun Babatunde.
All right, thank you very much, dear Leah Katun Babatunde, for the business package. Next for us now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Yes, Bayo Atoyebi, who's ready to do the review with us again today. Good morning to you, Bayo.
Thank you, Blessing. Good morning. Good morning, Kensley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, pleasure to have you join us. We're beginning straight away, of course. There are stories that are common to the front pages of the papers that we have this morning, stories coming out of the Senate, as well as, of course, stories relating to the Naira and the CBN. Let's begin our review by taking a look at the front page of This Day newspaper right now. This Day says, analysts hail CBN's Naira defense as rate for PTA orders is adjusted to 360 Naira to the dollar. Now, there is a rider to that. It says, caution central bank on maturing forex forwards and oil price volatility. That's to say the analysts are also cautioning the central bank on the maturing forex forwards and oil price volatility. And bank pumps another $185 million into market. Now, Obasanjo's wife files suit in Lagos court to stop son's wedding. That's a family issue, and the details, of course, can be found inside the paper. Then NGF, Melrose was duly engaged for Paris Club reforms. NGF stands for the Nigerian Governors Forum. With a rider, consultant says his relationship with Forum was professional and legal. So those are the some of the front pages, some of the headlines on the front page of This Day. But the latest story, of course, deals with the story out of the Senate. Saraki appears before Ethics Committee and clears self of seized Range Rover. And there are 3 riders to that. Dealer reveals Owando imported vehicle and clearing documents were fake. VC confirms Melaye graduated from ABU in year 2000. Dino Melaye, of course, is a senator. And Undume, that's also another senator, and raised issues to protect integrity of Senate. Now, MROS would never expropriate NNPC's products. Details of the story can be found inside.
All right. Thanks. Let me quickly take a look at the New Telegraph. The front page of the New Telegraph has the issue of the customs as well. You'll find it's captured this way. Customs impounds 13 vehicles from Senator with 2 riders. Importer, dealer exonerates Saraki over 298 million naira SUV. And Ahmadu Bello University Vice Chancellor clears Melaye of certificate scandal. You find details on page 2. But just above that, this windows of story, the Obasanjo's wife sues ex-president of her son's wedding. That's what you find on page 2. And the Naira issue, Central Bank of Nigeria crashes forex rate for PTA, BTA, school fees to 360 naira to $1. The details we find on page 30. Undergraduates kidnapped. Why are fought with abductors? This is coming from the father of the undergraduate. Find that story on page 8. Robbers raid patients and workers in Delta Hospital. That's what we find on page 9. How unhealthy can health be? Well, just above the New Telegraph, the nameplate, you find Kaduna Refinery's base oil unit suffers 22 years neglect. With 2 riders, desertion dips revenue by 22 billion naira. And NNPC says it will be put back to life. Starts right there but continues on page 4. Crude swap racket. NNPC recoups $202 million from I2. That's the name for a body, but you find that on page 2. Just below the photograph there, those are the vehicles belonging to some of the senators seized by customs in Kano yesterday. You have the story about the governor that was convicted ex-governor granted bail on health grounds. Says he has diabetes, hypertension, and suffers insomnia. That story you find on page 3. And the same story about the custom is trending on the front page of the Daily Trust, captured this way. Customs impounds senators 13 vehicles. Importer of Senate's 298 million naira SUV says papers fake.
Well, I'm appalled by the story about criminals raping people in hospitals. People don't have, yes, people don't have compassion. That story does not worth being given even a mention because it's so nauseating.
Absolutely. And of course, any person who is hospitalized is vulnerable.
Yes.
Yes, it's very disgusting. It just shows the level of depravity.
Yes. Talking about sickness too, the central bank has diagnosed that the economy required some foreign exchange treatment, so it injected some foreign exchange. 85 million is issued for sale to deposit money banks at a rate of 351 naira to $1. They are to sell at 360 naira to $1. And these are for invisibles, for basic travel allowance, personal travel allowance, and should be issued within 24 hours. For medicals and school fees, also should be issued within 48 hours. Another 100 million that was offered to the authorized forex dealer in the interbank for wholesale is also on. They have also given directives about how this should be gone about. All banks are to post the new rate of 360 to $1 on all electronic balls in their branches. Then former forex meant for the invisibles cannot also be sold to Bureau de Change. The Apex Bank has sent examiners to ensure that its directives are enforced. And guess who is crying? Operators of Bureau de Change are crying. They say that they are in fact not going to participate in today's weekly $25 million auction by the central bank. And the reasons are not far-fetched. The president, Aminu Gwadabe, says that this is because the market fundamentals and selling rate at 381 naira to $1 does not favor Bureau de Change. They say that they are now calling on the central bank for international money transfer operators that the rate at 381 is not profitable for them. They are proposing that they should be given a rate that is 330. At that rate, they will survive and found it profitable. Now, talking about the Senate Committee, Ethics, Privileges and Public Petition yesterday heard evidences regarding alleged importation of bulletproof car as well as fake qualifications. The Vice Chancellor of Ahmadu Bello University, Professor Ibrahim Garba, confirmed that Daniel Jonah Melaye graduated from ABU with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Geography. The importation of the bulletproof SUV, the dealer who imported it indicated that it had nothing to do with the person and the office of Dr. Bukola Saraki. This clears the information that was making the rounds in the social media and the conventional media, which Senator Ali Ndume brought to the House for clarification so as to safeguard the integrity of the Senate. However, reports indicate that some senators are incensed and there are threats that Senator Ali Ndume is likely to be suspended. That is in the works. Meanwhile, the Customs Compliance Task Force in Kano and Jigawa states have impounded 223 vehicles. This is part of its operations in the last 8 months. Among those vehicles are 13 that were seized at Megatari in the home of a senator. Meanwhile, the home of that senator has been sealed and the 13 vehicles have been impounded by the board of the custom, the Kano command. Other items seized were also foodstuff worth about 265.5 million.
All right, Bayo, thanks a lot. I'm sure we'll get to hear more from the Senate Ethics and Privileges Committee with regard to the issues that it's taking evidence on regarding the Senate President as well as Senator Dino Melaye. Of course, I'm sure that we're also aware that there's litigation already with respect to the publication that he didn't graduate from ABU. I think he has instituted a libel suit in that respect. But of course, some of the details obviously will continue to emerge, in the days ahead. Let's return to the Authority newspaper as our next to consider. Federal government to borrow $6.1 billion to complete rail projects. Federal government to borrow $6.1 billion to complete rail projects. And then the second lead story below the photograph on the front page says, herdsmen block road and rob commuters in Delta. Herdsmen block road and rob commuters in Delta. And above the name plate of the Authority newspaper, there are 3 other headlines there. 2 of them will take. UTME, that's the matriculation exam. JAMB mobilizes rapid team to tackle registration hitches. That's on page 4. And Bayo already discussed this in part. Customs Service intercepts 5,000 cartons of banned drugs in Lagos.
One of the stories I took from the New Telegraph is just below the nameplates for the Daily Trust. Former Adamawa governor, that's Bala Nglari, convicted. 2 prison officers are being queried over fake health reports. That's what we find on page 4. Just moving down, okay, let's move down the front page of the Daily Trust. Below the photograph, of course, the photograph now you have Senator Bala, I beg your pardon, Senator Binta Masi Garba, Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tuku Buratai, Minister of Defense General Mansur Danali, retired, and Borno State Governor Kashim Shettima. Listen to the General Commanding Officer of the Nigerian Army, Brigadier General Victor Ezugu, inside the Sambisa Forest at the opening of the Nigerian Army Small Arms Championship at the Sambisa Forest in Borno yesterday. To the other stories, Senate plots Ndume's suspension. That's what you find on page 3. How will blew whistle on $1.1 billion Malabo deal? That story is on page 8. And 5 directors sacked, staff redeployed at Pitad. Okay, Bayo.
Yes, the story about former governor of Adamawa, Bala Nglari, is causing a lot of ripples. He was convicted for 5 years on 6th of March. After about 22 days, he has now been granted bail for 100 million with 2 sureties in the amount. But the controversy arising from there is that a letter was written from the prison to the court to say that his health condition was critical. He has high blood pressure, he has high level of sugar level and also was suffering from insomnia. That letter was dated on 23rd. Another letter from the same prison to the headquarters say that the man is healthy and the prison has facilities to take care of his health conditions. And so the high command of the prisons is inquiring about the mystery about surrounding that. Meanwhile, the Abuja runway reconstruction is scaled the halfway of the 6 weeks that is meant to be done. 40% of work is confirmed to have been completed so far. This was a brief that was provided to the House Committee on Aviation that visited yesterday. They are saying that the markings of 3.6 kilometers runway is completed. Laying of fiber guided for electricity also is on. However, the chairman of the Committee of Aviation, Nkiruka Onyejocha, had expressed doubt about meeting the deadline. This also has also been contradicted by the Honorable Minister of Information and the Minister for Aviation, who also briefed the aviation industry in Lagos yesterday. The Minister of Aviation has in fact put his office on the line. He says if the deadline is not met, he will resign. So he is as sure as certain that the airport will be completed.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, except perhaps we should add a caveat that in the absence of any act of God before the 19th of April. I mean, quite clearly, I mean, yes, Abuja is not susceptible to earthquakes or earth tremors. Assuming on the 17th of April there's a tremor that affects the runway that's already been worked on.
In fact,
the
site engineer said there's a 19-point program, and they are following it diligently, and they are very much in
absolutely. In fact, the story is also on the front page of the leadership, and then we also took it in our bulletin this morning with respect to the fact that there is no extension of the April 19th deadline, that further works will continue after the airport has been reopened on the 19th, and that's the way it should be. I'm just slightly concerned about the rendering of the story of the former governor of Adamawa. You say it's already been convicted.
Yes.
You are granting him bail for 100 million naira.
The circumstances are quite strange, though. He was convicted. He has appealed his conviction. Yes. I'm not sure whether there's been a stay of execution, but these are circumstances surrounding his health, which the court felt was very critical.
That's fine. At what point do you grant bail? And then, bail with 2 shorties or with 1 or more shorties?
After being convicted?
Absolutely. Those are issues.
All right.
It's the way the story has been rendered. All right, so that's blessing. That's the much we can take, with regard to this part review. Bayo, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that does it for our newspaper review segment. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be dealing with our principal item for discussion this morning.
call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go so let the change begin from within. Look at you, oh Gerula. Change begins with you and me. Oh, change begins with me. Oh, change begins with me. Oh, change begins with me.
Coming up, we visit David Daniele. In the 10 months since he appeared on Airtel Touching Lives, his Center for Citizens with Disabilities has gone from strength to strength.
Thank you, Airtel. We are glad that you came.
And for Emmanuel Onyeka, his dream of completing his studies has been dashed. A tragic Okada accident in 2015 had left him an amputee.
NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, a subsidiary of the Nigerian Television Authority, specializes in creating comfort in all areas of life, such as real estate investments, that is, land, houses, and office spaces, mass leasing, savings and loan scheme, household items and car loans, and so much more. Other information and entertainment services include Property in Style, a TV program that airs on the network service of the NTA, and also Property Connect, a nationwide magazine. Our priority is to bridge poverty gaps and sustain quality welfare of our clients. Partner with us and watch us help you grow. Pay us a visit today at the NTA headquarters permanent site, Area 11 Garki, Abuja, or our Lagos office at number 15 Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, Lagos. For more information, visit our website on www.ntaproperties.com.ng, or you can email us on ntap2000@yahoo.com. Call us on 080-2316-3474 or 080-6939-5185 or 070-3189-0555. NTA Properties Investment Company Limited, the much needed help at your doorstep.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Time for our background report to prompt our conversation this morning. Now, over the years, Nigeria, like other climes, have been grappling with the issue of gas flaring. However, government and international oil companies have been making effort to end the flaring. In spite of the successes achieved, the issue is still of great concern to various stakeholders in view of its economic, environmental, as well as health implications to the affected communities in particular and the nation at large. Hamad Mbali will tell us more in this report.
Imagine a large chimney spewing forth flames in a dark, cold village that lacks electricity. Every day, 365 days in a year, while the people shiver in cold, the air above them is warmed by heat generated from right under their feet by the precious charcoal reserves. Picture this, and you could be close to having an idea of gas flaring in Nigeria. A recent survey ranked Nigeria among the top 7 nations with the highest amount of gas flaring per day. In 2016, a report from the NNPC put the annual cost of this wasteful enterprise at 217 billion naira. An amount which, if placed side by side the Kwara State budget estimates for 2017 of 135 billion, it would exceed it by 82 billion. Such is the extent of waste that comes from gas flaring, leaving one to wonder why in a nation like Nigeria such a practice continues. Aside the economic aspect, there are health and environmental implications of gas flaring. Experts suggest government make stringent laws and take drastic actions against defaulting companies. This is in addition to the call for the injection of gas flared into energy sources or as liquefied natural gas, domestic cooking gas, or other uses. A suitable starting point, experts believe, will be to pass into law the Petroleum Industry Bill. With its framework on gas flaring implemented alongside the nation's existing gas master plan, observers believe some measure of sanity could be brought into the way gas is flared in Nigeria. For a nation looking to fully utilize its oil and gas wells, these suggestions and more from guests on NTA Good Morning Nigeria can help in putting a lead on gas flaring as is obtained in advanced societies.
Ahmad Ambali, thank you very much there for that background report. Now we have guests to further discuss the subject matter. First, we'd like to welcome Malam Bello Rabiu, who is Chief Operating Officer upstream of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC. Malam Rabiu, a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Then we also have joining us from our Lagos Network studio, 2 guests.
Oh, yes, we have... First of all, we'd like to introduce Mr. Felix Ekundayo, who is the Managing Director, Gas Terminaling and Distribution Limited. Good to have you on the program, Mr. Ekundayo.
Good morning. Good to be here. Thank you very much.
And also seated in Lagos studio, we have Professor Wumi Iledare. is the president, Nigerian Association for Energy Economics. Professor Laidare, good to have you on the program as well.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Kingsley?
All right. Let's begin with the Chief Operating Officer of NNPC, the upstream segment. Malam Rabiu, even next year it should be 60 years since Nigeria began, commercial exploitation of crude oil, first at Oloibiri, and yet we are still talking about gas flaring.
Thank you very much, and again, thank you for having us here to discuss this very important national issue of gas flaring. Well, gas flaring is an issue that has tremendous economic and environmental impact, but it's something that had started with oil production globally. More than 150 years ago, gas flaring had been on, and it's still on in many countries. But the advantage we have here now is that we have done a lot in Nigeria to reduce gas flaring. The best you can do anywhere is to reduce it to the barest minimum and ultimately not have any routine gas flaring. In 2006, about 10 years ago, Nigeria was the second largest flaring nation in the world. Today, we are number 7, as indicated in the report. So we have gone a long way in reducing gas flaring in Nigeria. Secondly, this country, Nigeria, had a very good plan called Gas Master Plan that is aimed at commercializing the entire gas we produce in the country. So ultimately, we are getting there. Globally, both governments and industries have agreed to work to make sure that gas flaring is eliminated. And the target they're putting for themselves globally is 2030. Nigeria is aiming to finish and stop gas flaring routinely by 2020. As we speak today, America flare gas more than Nigeria. America is the 3rd nation after Russia and Iraq, and Iran, they are number 4. So clearly, Nigeria is doing a lot to reduce gas flaring. But it's not something that we're interested in having, but I think Nigeria is in the right direction in trying to reduce gas flaring in the country.
What do you mean by routine gas flaring?
Routine gas flaring means, like the reporter says, daily production of the gas, or burning of the gas. So there's no way you can use it but just to burn it. Because gas is coming with oil production, and if you have nothing to do with it, the only thing you can do is to flare it. And that is the routine gas flaring. But if you are just to stop the production of the oil and just do some maintenance, during that period, you just have to burn the gas small, that's not routine. So that's just operational. But for routine gas flaring, which is currently happening in the world, is a big issue. We're actually delivering or flaring more than 5 billion cubic feet of gas every day in the world, globally. In Nigeria, we're flaring less than 700 million scope.
All right, Malam Rabiu, for practitioners, at least experts in the industry, what kind of practice is done with such associated gas world over, at least for those who have stopped the flaring or at least have continued? Is it to talk about re-injecting such? Why are we not catching on that effectively?
Yes, and we're doing that as well. There are many ways of using the gas. The problem with gas is not like oil, you cannot easily store it. So once you produce it, you have 4 or 5 ways of using it. You can either inject it back into the reservoir, if there's space to inject and put it there. You can also commercialize it by processing it and exporting it and selling it, or using it for power generation, fertilizer production, petrochemicals, many other things. In fact, the most important energy resource in the world.
So why are we not pushing in that direction?
It requires a lot of money. That's the only problem. If we can do it now, basically everybody can do it. But it takes a lot of money to process and bring it to market. That's the only problem. So if you have that opportunity, it's the best thing you can do, because clearly it is also not economical to just allow it to go, because it's a waste. So like the reporter says, it is extremely expensive to be just flaring gas like that. As we speak today, every 1,000 cubic feet of gas is at least about $2 per 1,000 cubic feet of gas. $1, which is about 300 naira in Nigeria today. But you are wasting about 700 million of that.
Okay, Malam Rabiu, still with you, and looking at such abundant blessings. Yes. In fact, Nigerian's gas is being described as an ocean of gas and a speck of oil. Our concentration is much on the oil against the gas that we have in abundance. And since we're even looking at other means of wealth now, as we have dwindling oil prices, even in international markets.
Yes.
Is it so much of an expense for us to tackle or to undertake as against the environmental implication, the economic implication, and even the health implications?
It is very well, actually, because if you can do it cheaper than oil, you can do that. But it's cheaper to produce oil than to produce gas and process it for utilization. That's the difference. So it takes so much money to process and deliver equivalent of 1 barrel of oil than gas. That's the difference. So Nigeria has a lot of gas. Unfortunately, again, we had never even gone to export for gas in Nigeria. So all the gas that we have in Nigeria today, which takes us to about number 10 in the world, we never went out to look for the gas. It's in the process of exploration for oil that we discovered gas. And we now have more than 190 trillion cubic of gas. So utilizing that gas for domestic and export market is the key challenge facing the country. And that's why investment is required. If we can actually put about $150 billion between now and the next 5 years, you can do that anything. You can get the maximum volume of gas. And we can move from the current production of 8 billion cubic feet of gas to about 15 billion, almost double. And that's the intention. So key issue is that they need investment. You have the technology available, you need the money to do it, and definitely you can commercialize the gas.
All right, Madam Rabiu, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Let's return to Lagos, where we are introduced Mr. Felix Kundayo as well as Professor Eledare. Let's get the views of Mr. Felix Kundayo with regard to investment. Obviously, if we've had this investment over the past decades, perhaps the quantum of gas that is being fled would have been substantially reduced. What are the obstacles to huge investments in gas exploitation in the country, exploitation and production?
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. Listening to Madam Rabiu and also speaking with Professor Ledare off camera, I think even starting with the topic of the day, the focus is on gas flaring, which is a focus on waste, as opposed to, say, for example, gas utilization, which is a focus on value addition and on economic growth activity. Perhaps if we were to look at it in that direction, then to your question, what has effectively limited investment in the gas sector in Nigeria? Often it is because policy in that sector is not very clear. Policy in our sector tends to be conflicted. It is often also treated as a stick approach as opposed to a carrot approach. Madam Rabiu mentioned a figure there of $150 billion in terms of investment for getting gas developments going in the next 5 years. That is a substantial figure, which I am sure that we will all agree is not within the nation's capacity to fund directly. Therefore, it means that the funding for that has to come from the private sector. If you want that kind of funding to come in, you must have clear policy. You must have continuity of policy. You must encourage businesses to invest. What we have often found is that because there's a lack of coordination of policy, there's a lack of, how should we say, interministerial, interdepartmental cooperation and alignment, that what one ministry or MDA is trying to do often tends to get in the way of what others are doing. Bills, acts such as the Petroleum Industry Bill, started off as laudable events, but in the process it became unwieldy. What we need is specific policy documents, bills, acts that follow and actually take an opinion of the industry. Where can we help you? What can we assist with? What are the problems that you are facing at the coalface? We need to see more of that in our development and our strive to get gas investment going.
Mr. Kundayo, the point you just made is noted, but some will also argue, yes, that the PIB is unwieldy, and the PIB has also lingered in the National Assembly for well over a decade now. But we know that there was a gas master plan that was unveiled a couple of years ago. And the gas master plan, some said, actually provided the clarity of policy that you seem to suggest is absent. What is your take on the gas master plan, and how well would that have conduced to investor confidence in getting into the fix?
Thank you very much. It's an interesting point that you make about the gas master plan, the Nigerian gas master plan. I will challenge anybody to show me what the gas master plan was. What we saw were a series of presentations in parts, which were dribble-fed to us in the industry. A gas master plan is not a presentation. It is a substantive document in volumes detailing what you need to do in order to develop your gas resources. I've been privileged to work on two of the largest gas master plans in the world that I know of today. The Jubail gas master plan in Saudi Arabia, and the Ras Laffan master plan in Qatar. Both gas master plans were substantive jumps in terms of gas infrastructure development, taking Saudi Arabia from 5 to about 10 billion scuff per day of gas utilization, not even gas flare down. And in Ras Laffan in Qatar, taking them from 5 to 35 billion cubic feet a day of consumption. Both were significant documents that involved detailed discussions with the industry. What do you want to do? Detailed discussions with investors. What do you need in order to be able to come here and produce? And assessments of markets all over the world, not just in Nigeria, but around. What can we produce? What can we add value? How can we add value to our gas and make products that the world actually wants? We haven't seen any of that. What we did have were I would say headline presentations, but no real substance behind it. We need to get some substance behind the gas master plans that we discuss and we produce in this country.
Mr. Kundayo, thanks a lot for your perspective. Let's, before we bring in Professor Ledare, let's return to our Abuja studios where Malam Bello Rabi is still here with us. Of course, he's CEO of Upstream NNPC. You listen to what Mr. Kundayo just said now with regard to the fact, according to him, there's no consistent, comprehensive gas master plan. How would you respond to that against the background of what we heard some years ago? The fact that there was going to be a gas city at Ogidigme, and you've had some of the ethnic groups, squabbling over that in Delta. You also had issues pertaining to the gas infrastructure, that is the structuring of the pipelines to transport the gas produced from the various fields, to the need centers, either for petrochemical or for power utilization. Were all this just mere paperwork and headline grabbers?
Thank you very much, and I think I will start by the gas master plan. What you was talking about, inconsistency, was about policies, but gas master plan is a strategic document for the country that was launched. We started it in 2005. It was actually launched in 2010. The gas master plan is a very comprehensive document that was discussed by the entire industry. In fact, it was sponsored by the industry. It was started by NPC, but almost all the companies operating in the country were involved. Of course, NPC led the initiative because NPC owned 62% of the gas in the country. So, but all the companies were part of it, and they sponsored it basically. We paid together to make that happen. That plan aimed to study and understand the issues of gas in Nigeria. And it came up with 4 key critical issues that need to be addressed, and they were all addressed. One is the gas availability itself. We have been saying that we have 197 trillion cubic feet of gas, or 180 or 3 trillion cubic feet of gas at that time, but we never sat down to understand what is available and what can be commercialized for utilization. That plan got that one ready, and we knew what we need for all the projects. It was at that point we realized that we cannot put all the projects that we are thinking we can put together and develop them, like all the LNGs. Because at that time, the total consumption in the domestic market for gas was about 300 million scope. At that time, in 2006, we were clearing 2.5 billion cubic feet of gas. So about 8 times what we use in the country is being cleared. So we try to address the issue of availability by making sure that we develop the gas to target the markets, both internal and external market. The second key issue facing the market was the infrastructure. At that time, we had only one major line that takes gas to Lagos, from Escravos to Lagos. And that was the only artery to commercialize the gas for domestic market. The other one is LNG at Boni. So clearly, there were issues of infrastructure to take the gas from the producing area to the market. And that was the second key challenge that we tried to address, and it was addressed. We actually had a gas infrastructure plan for the country, and it was also launched. I agree with him that it was not advertised and it was not seen by everybody, but it's something that we are trying now to codify into the new gas policy.
What were the other two issues?
Very good. So after the infrastructure, the other issue that we observed at that time was the commercial framework. At that time, we had a lot of incentives for gas production and development, but the commerciality, the gas was mainly sold to the power sector in the domestic market, but the power sector was not having the capacity to pay for that gas. So we had to do pricing framework that will enable the power sector to get the gas at affordable price and for the producer of the gas to get their money. So non-payment by the sectors as well was an issue. And that was what we tried to do to ensure that we have a solution. And of course, it was only about 3 weeks ago that we can now say the government has come up boldly to say that it will guarantee the payment of gas to the gas suppliers. And therefore, whether NEPA pays or they don't pay, whether the distribution companies pay or they don't pay, there will be a guarantee. First through the MBET, and that is the National Bulk Electricity Trading Company, as well as the Central Bank, and later World Bank will come in and take care of that. So that's a very important step that we have been working on since 2008. We are lucky about 3 weeks ago, the current government agreed with that one, and they have set aside about 701 billion naira for this year alone to ensure that the transition is taking off. And the last aspect of it is the affordability of the market as well, because there is no liquidity in the market to ensure that every segment takes the gas. So we try to segregate the pricing of gas by taking the most important segment, which is power, to get the least price, and then the other sectors like cement and others to get commercial price for the gas. So we are going to have aggregate price for gas in Nigeria so that people producing the gas will be assured of getting their own value for the gas they sell, because every investor will want to have value for his investment as well as profit return. To do that, we have established a company owned by all the producing companies in the country that we call Gas Aggregation Company of Nigeria. That will assure the producers get their own price for gas, and that price also had reached export parity. Because at that time, the price had not even reached that export parity. That will ensure that they prepare to sell the gas in domestic or export, and they have no difference. But now we have reached that level. As we speak today, the gas that we sell to domestic market, even to power sector, about $2.50. We don't even get that value for the export market. And that's the issue we are trying to address at that time.
What value do you get from the export
It's
market?
about $1.70 or $1.80.
So it's overpriced for the local buyers?
Exactly. So by the time we have this infrastructure set up, everything ready, we are going to be competing with the export market.
All right. Well, Bello Rabiu, thanks a lot. Blessing. Yes. Yeah, let's go back to Lagos. Professor Iladare, just before you speak on other aspects, I would like you to expatiate on the point that Malam Bello Rabiu just touched on, gas pricing. We knew that some years ago that was one of the knotty issues, in particular after the privatization of PATN, after it was unbundled and so on and so forth. They were talking about, the absence of gas to fire their plants and so on and so forth, that, if the pricing wasn't appropriate, the last administration grappled with it and it's just said now that they've been able to sort that out. But why would it be? I mean, what is the practice worldwide? You are a gas or an oil producing country, and yet, your domestic market gets it, at international price benchmark. And yet, you also have an NOC, that's a national oil company, which is the NNPC. Does this lead to the distortions that we find all around in terms of the knock-on effect?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And Engineer Rabiu, it's nice to see you this morning. The pricing of natural gas is complicated, but we need to go back to have an understanding of why we are where we are before we think in terms of pricing. First, you have two categories of gas. One is associated, and the other one is non-associated. What we are talking about is the gas that is produced with oil. And then you have to look at it from the consideration. First, NNPC is the owner of that gas on behalf of the government. And you have to understand that that gas is a waste product because the license that was given to the international company is to produce oil. And so when you get gas, it's more or less a nuisance. And so that's where we started. And then it has zero value at that particular time because the complaints were not looking for gas. So government has to come in to do something. Now, the pricing is a signal to be able to make a choice as to whether you develop a particular product. And I give this background because you look at Nigeria development of their natural resources. Up till now, we tend to emphasize foreign exchange earnings. And that has been the Achilles heel for us to be able to expand our economy. And one must commend the government right now with the gas policy document, which is the first time ever we actually have something that we can debate and have a guideline. Yes, I understand the gas master plan and all the different components of it. But if you really look at the gas master plan, and like the MD said, it's a combination of different presentations. It's not like the gas document that we have now, which you can actually read, criticize, and then evaluate. Now, let's come to gas and the practice worldwide. Natural gas competes with itself for use in terms of gas to power, in terms of industrial sector, in terms of even CNG, in terms of other use. So in that case, you have to do pricing by discrimination, even though the way the gas is produced is about the same, especially if it is associated. And I think Engineer Rabiu touched on to the crux of the matter when it comes to pricing. It begins with the investment to be able to bring the gas to the commercial end. What you need to bring it to an industrial sector is different from what you need to bring it to the gas power plant. And so you cannot have the same price. What you even need to be able to bring it to use for vehicle is different. So there can be no uniform pricing at the end user. However, the pricing at the well edge is the key to determine what we call the city gate price and the end user's price. So these things are very complex. Of course, also the market for individual components of the industry is also different. One is a pure monopoly. The other one may be more competitive. And that means there are some that you have to have a regulatory commission that will fix price. You cannot fix price for every sector because the volume they have or require is different. Again, this is where competence comes in. And this is where you need to make sure you develop the manpower capacity, both for the end user who will come and ask for a price and for the government who will authorize the price. What has brought us to where we are is trying to go and climb the ladder from the top without starting from the beginning. And that's why I really support the gas policy document that we have now. Although it's not perfect, but it's a good starting point. You cannot just go and regulate price or determine price without looking at how to bring the resource to the end user. And that's where I think we need to actually look at the framework, subject it to intellectual debate, as well as pragmatic application of what is obtained everywhere else. I also want to, before I go on, you do not necessarily have to price your gas at the international market. I mean, you don't price your labor at the international market. The engineers working in NNPC are not paid the same salaries with the engineer working in Kuwait National Oil Company. So your natural resources could be priced on what I call either a marginal cost pricing or an average cost pricing. So you don't necessarily have to, yes, you are competing with international market, but the value chain you receive locally is not necessarily going to be priced at $1 rate. So you have to put so many things into consideration as to arrive at the commodity price for your local economy. I'm not saying you are not competing, but at the same time, the value added for gas consumed in Nigeria is far higher than when you get the international foreign exchange price, because that's some of the things you have leakages in the economy, because you tend to think that you have a lot of money and let go of your responsibility. So all of these must be put into the consideration when pricing the gas. There must be a fundamental understanding of what goes into determining the price of gas for a local competition or local consumption.
Professor Eledare, thank you very much there for your explanation. But Professor Eledare, I would like you to consider still, the point made by Malam Bello Rabiu with regard to the discriminatory pricing that we now have. Okay, perhaps the cheapest price index will go to the power sector, and then there's a higher markup for, say, industries, in particular, cement. And we have seen in the past year, 6 months or more, how the price of cement has skyrocketed. First, there was the alibi of the exchange rate of the naira, and now if you were to sell gas at a discriminatory higher price to cement producers, we can also imagine what the implication would be. Does this speak to, the policy dissonance that Mr. Kundaya was talking about earlier? The government has millions of houses in terms of deficit to bridge, and if the price of cement goes up, the price of blocks will go up, the price of construction will go up, the price of delivering a home will go up, and so on and so forth. How can we bring all of this into the policy mix and ensure that, an action being taken in one segment or sector does not then create a negative knock-on effect?
Yes, sir. I understand the complexity, and that's why any policy you have are interrelated. However, if you do not pay for the person who is looking for the gas, it's not going to look for it. So what are you going to do? Again, this is where maybe, and I know that we're in a very complex situation where we have economic downturn. In the developed world, that's where you talk in terms of tax incentive, whereby maybe you can suspend royalty payment on tax to make sure that the profitability, even at the low price, is going to be meeting up the requirement for investment. This is where policy is not static, it's dynamic. No, I remember, and I must have given this example before, when the international companies were moving out of the Gulf of Mexico in the early 1990s, the US government suspended royalty payment based on tax and cumulative production. And this is why people cannot just go to the office and be reading papers. You have to follow the dynamics. If you observe that the gas price to the industrial sector is going to be too high because of what the price is required to go and look for gas in the Niger Delta or even the Benue Trough or even the Anambra Basin, then you look at the price of gas at this particular moment and find out if it is too high, it's going to affect the other sector. Then you do something on the government side to create an incentive for them to go and look for that gas, thereby the price that will make them achieve what I call the normal rate of return will not be high. I don't necessarily, you can do what you call a price subsidy. The one that requires the gas, because they are consuming a higher volume, can again pay more. And this is when, in a monopoly market, you have to set up the price on the basis of average cost pricing or marginal cost pricing. The person who is investing knows the tariff for gas that is going to make it possible for him to break even. He presents his investment profile. The regulator understands the cost benchmark, whereby you are going to be able to come to terms in which what is the normal rate of return for the investment for a particular sector. And this is the way it is done, especially for an emerging economy like us. We cannot just go and import the process or the model for an already established economy and impose it on an emerging economy that we are. It's not theoretical. It's actually a pragmatic approach. to be able to always bring the investor on the table and the regulators on the table. You look at the investment profile that they have to deliver a service, even in the cement factory. And then you come up with a price that both of them can accept. It's not imposition of price. It's the price that will bring in what we call normal rate of return for investment.
Professor Eledare, still with you in Lagos. Let's return to Mr. Felix Kundayo there. Yes, while we're looking at various measures to addressing or enforcing zero gas flaring in Nigeria. Also want to appreciate the process to its great utilization. Now, in your own estimation, taking a look at what every one of you have tried to talk about, from the gas master plan to other initiatives put up by the government, what are the greatest frustration in part of this master plan, as well as other initiatives that have come on stream to actually address the issue of discuss this morning?
Right, thank you very much. I suppose taking on from where Professor Eledare left off in terms of the issue of incentives, in terms of the issues of policymakers actually sitting with industry practitioners, that is most important. Anything that is developed needs to have flexibility. For example, we talked earlier a moment ago about the price of gas domestically now being higher than international prices. That's because these markets are dynamic. When the policy was set, or when the pricing was set, it was in the way. The international prices were higher. So we need flexibility in a system whereby when the dynamics change, the regulation can also adapt quickly. Our problem tends to be, or our historical problem tends to be, we codify numbers. We end up with numbers that are in documents that are written and cast in stone. It therefore makes it very difficult to go back and revisit. For example, our industry, liquefied gases, you would not believe that for 10 years we have been trying to reverse what we would term to be an anomaly, if not an error, in policy document. This is the only fuel that has VAT applied to it. How do you VAT a locally produced product and then you exempt or you subsidize its competitor, liquid fuels, coming into the country? It has taken us over 10 years on the same subject. Every time we get traction with the government of the day, a change occurs and we have to start again from scratch. What it then tends to do is to disincentivize investors, both local and foreign, from coming in. We need to be more dynamic in terms of how we react to what are dynamic markets. The market is often the best regulator for itself, but within that you have frameworks that enable the markets to work. In order to attract investment to the gas sector, we have to take industry views into account. We must start to discuss, we must start to understand, and most importantly, it's not just a talking shop. We must enact, we must act on what the pain points of industry are, and quickly.
Kundayo, just before we go on this short break, you were talking earlier about the fact that in Nigeria we tend oftentimes to regard numbers as being cast in stone in various policy documents, and the frustration you just said that your part of your industry has encountered with regard to VAT imposed and then apparent subsidy on imported products. Where exactly do you get the obstacle? Is it within, say, the Ministry of Finance bureaucracy, or within the oil bureaucracy, that's to say the NNPC, or is it DPR, or is it the presidency, or is just a combination of it all, or you are not speaking to the right persons?
It's not. It wouldn't be appropriate to single or segment out one particular area. And by the way, these things are not acts that are deliberately done. They are simply a confluence of, how should we say, conflicts within different policy aspects generated by different MDAs. What we're saying is that it takes a unified approach. You cannot develop gas policy in isolation. You must talk to all the stakeholders, be it Ministry of Finance, understanding what the incentives are and why the incentives need to be given, be it the customs, be it the Ministry of Petroleum or the regulators. It is a collective action. The waste of resources that we have, we've mentioned the value of gas in the region of $2 to $2.50 per million BTU. For every BTU of gas that we flare, we have to substitute it with 14 to 15 times that dollars per MMBTU, which means that every energy unit of gas we flare, we must replace it with 7 times as much in monetary value to the economy. That's a huge loss. Every $100 million, every $1 billion that we talk about flaring, that's $7 billion of replacement energy that we will still consume anyway. Those kind of numbers mean that we must sit together. We can't keep on at the pace we have been going at for the last 40, 50 years. The waste of resource is tangible in terms of the gas flare side. What is not tangible is what we have lost, the value add to the economy, the replacement fuels that we have had to purchase, the anomaly or the drain on our balance of payments. All of these things are substantive things that are dragging us down as a nation. So it's not really for us to sit here and finger point. It is simply to say, look, it is time now to change approach. If you have been taking a Panadol for a headache for the last 40 years and it hasn't worked, it is about time we change the medication.
Thank you very much, Mr. Felix Kundayo. Professor Ledare, Malam Bilo Rabiu. We'll go on this break now. When we return, there are reactions already from our viewer who have joined us via our Twitter handle at NTAGM, and keep them coming. We will definitely take a look at them when we return from this break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria.
Vote for me, and I will turn night into day.
Vote me, I will ban for more importation. Everybody will start eating turkey and chicken.
Put me in power, and I will bring winter to West Africa.
I'll turn all the taxi into blame.
Campaign promises. Another hilarious episode of Professor John Bull, your rib-cracking comedy. Find out the true gist of election violence, betrayals, and promises as Olani goes head-to-head with Udo.
Who you mean?
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTN Network International and Star Times.
By the time I become the chairman, I will make you my special advisor.
Why not go make me money advisor?
What is wrong with you, Madoya? That is why people will look at politicians as thieves.
Over and out. Brought to you by Glow. Welcome to the new speed.
When I came into the school, that was 2 years ago.
The roofings weren't good.
We manage classes.
Our machines weren't working.
Most of us will come to school with our own seats.
Until 2015. Some of the machines are now working. We have electricity in the school.
The same building, housing, library, and the computer, that's ICT, was completely renovated.
We are now comfortable in our classes now.
During the construction, there was a borehole sunk that helped the builders in the building. And so the school is enjoying that borehole now.
This is the new Imo state, where education is free. The Imo Rescue Mission. Imo must be better.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Savlon leaves you free to live more and do more. It's formulated by Johnson & Johnson to kill over 99.9% of germs on skin.
All right, welcome back. And still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My colleague Blessing indicated before we went on that short break that there were reactions already from viewers on the subject matter that we are discussing this morning. Let's take those reactions now. Listen.
Yes, start off that of Sani Michael Omako just said, how would hostilities against oil producing companies stop when gas flaring, that is injurious to health, continues unabated?
And then we have this tweet from Mahmoud Haman. It says, gas flaring is the greatest leakage of national wealth, even as the country is in shortage of cooking fuel and faces desertification.
Andrew Ogboro has a tweet. Please tell Malam Rabiu, that is, it is not the amount of money, but the political will is the reason we're still flaring.
And Dele Jack Solomon, apart from economic waste being a consequence of gas flaring, it contains toxicants that can cause pollution and deplete the ozone layer.
And another one from Dele Jack Solomon, it says that inability to harness gas flaring are due to lack of political will on the part of the government and technology to control flares.
And we also have this from Kayo Sam Eno. It tweets, what is the federal government doing about the states affected by gas flaring?
And still with Kayo Sam Eno, it said the compensation money saved in Central Bank of Nigeria. When will the host community start getting their compensations?
All right. Now, those are some of the tweets that we have in the meantime. Let's return to our guest. We have still with us the COO Upstream NNPC, Malam Bello Rabiu. Malam Bello Rabiu, you listen to some of the tweets and what they were talking about, you know, in terms of, for some of them relate to political decisions. But let's begin. In the past, part of the argument was that, okay, the reason why gas flaring continued was the inadequacy of the penalty for gas flaring. Now, is the penalty clause still very relevant today in light of the various policy issues you have articulated, as well as the gas utilization roadmap that we now have? And if the penalty is still valid, are we going to see a crank up of the quantum?
Exactly, and I think, like Ladari says, now we have a policy in place which we call National Gas Policy. It's circulated, and the industries and every stakeholder, we're all looking at it. And that is the first step to tell people what we are trying to do. So the government policy is not clear. There is a clear way of telling people and the operators what the government wanted to do. And like I said, clearly the government wanted to eliminate flaring by 2020. Even the penalty is not the key issue. It's actually all going to be increased as well as part of the act of the National Assembly. But it is not going to be increased because we wanted money. No. It's going to be increased because we wanted to save the environment. The key issue is to eliminate the flaring. So that is very clear, and it's very important for people to understand that, well, it is also important to save and get the best value for the gas that we have in the country, but environmental issues are the key to driving us to that direction. So, and as long as the gas is being played and penalties are being put in place and facilities are put in place to also commercialize the gas, we believe we'll reach that level. So it will take some time, but I think we're almost getting there. From 36% of the gas that we produce that was being played 10 years ago, now we're at less than 10%. No country achieved that in the last 10 years. So I think Nigeria had gone very, very far in terms of that.
I mean, let me ask this question, yes, because it's a question that also agitates a number of persons. Sometimes there are concerns raised about whether indeed Nigeria knows, how much crude oil it is producing, that we do not have our fingers right on the accurate numbers. When you say that from 36% to 10% in terms of gas flaring reduction over a decade, are we sure of these numbers?
Yes, we are sure of this number. In fact, technology had gone very far in this world now. You don't even need to talk to DPR or to talk to NPC to know about the flaring in Nigeria. If you go to the website of the World Bank, there's an entity called Global Gas Flaring Reduction Initiative. They will tell you on a daily basis what every flare point is flaring. And they have that one from the satellite. So it's something that you can easily see. If you just go to that website, they will tell you that as we speak, 2016 actual flaring globally shows Nigeria as number 7. I'm from number 2 position in 2006. It's very easy because it's a private and government partnership arrangement that the World Bank is financing. So that is independent of anything. So we can say we don't know the oil production, but I can tell you everybody knows what is being played from about 16,000 flaring units points in the world.
All right, Madam Bello Rabiu, thanks a lot. Let's return to Lagos. Professor Iledare, there's a tweet there that we got a moment ago pertaining to the shortage of cooking fuel or the cost of cooking fuel, along with desertification that we find in the Sahelian part of the country. Of course, there were moves in the past to encourage increased domestic use of gas. How can we, upscale gas utilization for domestic uses, as well as also cut down on desertification? Because as you very well know, you go to some arid parts of the country where trees are few and far between, and then you find heaps of firewood, obviously from trees that have been cut down.
Thank you again, and let me quickly make a comment on the political will, because that's very important before we go in to be able to actually meet the need of the domestic market for gas. The political will is when you empower institutions to do the job that you have given them to do. When you have a penalty for flaring that is $3.50 per 1,000 cubic feet since 2008, and you still allow what you have in 1998 to be the modus operandi to reduce flaring, there's a problem there. Secondly, you have to come to realization that the money you need to be able to do domestic gas utilization, the government is responsible for providing it to the international company for them to be able to harness the gas. Those are also issues. Well, if the international companies need $100 to be able to develop gas and stop flaring, then the government must make available on average $58 out of that 100, and the government does not have it. Third, political will. You need the oil money, and so the government will come to realization and not blame the international oil company for flaring. If you have the political will, you tell the company that discover oil with gas and no gas plant to shut down. You can't do that because 60 barrels of the 100 barrels produced belong to you. So that those are the political will. When you pass a law or an act, it must be enforced. And then you will see that the $3.50 penalty since 2008 is far higher than $2.50 that you derive from the gas value. You are not going to flare because you are going to pay $3.50. Now look also, and I'm going to answer the question that you posed, look also to majority of the gas project that we have in Nigeria is subsidized by the government. That means we're actually using oil money to allow those projects to be executed. Lack of political will is making us to do that. Perhaps maybe you have personality interest too. Those are the things that we have to solve before we are able to do the gas for domestic use. Now, with respect to improving domestic utilization of gas for the household, it takes a lot of investment. And it takes a lot of policy revisitation. You are subsidizing petroleum consumption, which is more or less just burning money. You look over the years throughout the last administration from 2010 to 2015, I'm not blaming anybody. We spend 1/4 of the budget on average to subsidize petroleum consumption, something we just burn. And a lot of people are suffering on the basis of even having cooking gas. Let's look at even the LPG that is produced by LNG. How do we get it? We sold quite a lot of it. Go to Ghana. Look at the LPG consumed in Ghana compared to the LPG consumed in Nigeria. Here, this is where you need public education, which we are not doing a lot of. Why should people be able to buy card for telephone conversation, for joking and sending out fake news? And they will tell you they cannot pay for LPG. It's lack of public education. So, and it's the responsibility of the government to educate its people as to the consequences of their actions. All of these are interwoven. And this is even where you, and I want to appreciate you, the two of you, you did a good job giving a very good background on flaring. See, political will is very important. Executing the policy that are put in place by the government is equally important. But the government must empower the institutions that were put in place to do its job. Less political expediency. We must emphasize economic expediency for us to be able to develop the natural gas market for domestic utilization.
Professor Eledare, thank you very much. A touch on weak fines and ignored legislation where it ought to be. But let's also look at other predicaments, actually, frustrating our efforts in completing some of the projects. Of course, we've had, I think sometimes on this program too, we talked about the LNG project. Exactly. Right. Now, let us look where we need to be pushing more energy to actually address the issue, whether on the local scene, because apart from environmental issues, apart from the commercial purposes which we are looking at today, that's on utilization, there are other environmental challenges, there are health implications. How do we begin to put all of this in perspective to actually make those agencies that we're now talking about to actually be on top of their tools to get us the effectiveness we want in the sector?
Oh, thank you very much again. This is why we have the governance bill in place. In my opinion, if the governance bill that is as part of the second reading in the Senate is actually pushed forward, some of these issues that you raise with respect to who is in charge of some of these issues will be clear. Right now, we have an amorphous regulatory institutional agencies. The oil and gas industry is heavily penalized because nearly every agency of the government today wants to regulate the oil and gas industry. And we need to find a way to move at that. The institutions that will help us to accomplish majority of the things we want to accomplish in the oil and gas industry is still very weak. And this is what I'll call a fundamental issue that needs to be resolved. The environment, if it is being damaged, we must be able to control for it. And this is where I've always said that the government, when allocating funds to the state, must try to tie it to projects. Unfortunately, we always invoked our constitution as the reason why we cannot do what we are doing. Some of it must be tested to the Supreme Court to make sure that they are just not fallacy. But we don't even do that. So I think this is where the oil and gas policy document, the natural gas policy document, and the fiscal framework document that the government is putting into place is going to help us to address some of these issues headlong. However, there must be, and I want you to listen to me very well, regulatory backing to government policies before they can have teeth. And that is where, in my opinion, this year is very critical when it comes to the oil and gas industry. And then this is my opinion. If we don't do what we are supposed to do with the petroleum industry bill, we are looking at another 2-3 years to be able to address some of these issues, be it environmental, be it economics. You can even see that the oil and gas industry in Nigeria today is not adding significant value to the economy because they are not geared towards expanding of the economy. We're just getting revenue, sharing it. The oil and gas industry has made us to be a rentier, sharing people. And then we can address the critical issues that the oil and gas industry is actually creating, which is environmental degradation. And without a good policy towards resolving those issues,
Professor Eledare, let's back up a bit now. We're getting on the home stretch of our conversation this morning. You've raised a number of points, and Felix Akundaya, of course, is still there at our Lagos Network Studios with you. But before I move on to Mr. Akundaya, to also provide his perspective on some of the points that you have raised, you touched on what is, in the view of some persons, a potentially provocative suggestion in terms of the ongoing agitation for fiscal federalism, that the federal government should tie funds allocated to states to specific projects. I'm sure some persons will argue, I mean, you already have basic entities dealing with that, NDDC, for instance, and then they will also argue you have the Ecological Funds Office, which is domiciled with the federal government. Exactly what has happened in terms of the utilization of the funds in that particular office. That's one point, but I don't want us to return to that, I said, because we have, pressed for time. You also spoke passionately about the need to have, a much enhanced regulatory framework. In your opinion, has the Department of Petroleum Resources, which ordinarily is supposed to be the czar of the oil industry, has it outlived its usefulness?
Oh, the answer is no. The answer is no. That you give them autonomous in governance, autonomous in structure, autonomous in finance. Yes, you have the Department of Petroleum Industry, Department of Petroleum Resources, but do they have the instrument to be able to discharge their function effectively? Do you allow them not to depend on the people they want to regulate to get what they need to do their job? Those are the issues. For 20 years, I've advocated for an independent, autonomous, structurally organized regulatory framework for the oil and gas industry. Something close to the CBN type of regulator. And for the first time, we have a bill now called the Governance Bill that has a Nigerian Petroleum Regulatory Commission to be able to do this type of job. If we do that, then they'll be able to do their job effectively. They can't even effect the $3.50 penalty on flaring. Why? Because they are not enabled to be able to do their job independently of the industry that they regulate. So you end up with what I call regulatory capture. If you are going to regulate me, but I'm going to provide you the tool to do your regulation, then you're at my mercy. This is what the governance bill is talking about. Nigerian Petroleum Regulatory Commission that is independent, autonomous, and empowered to function. Even the funding is provided there. Yes, appropriated. But you go and learn from Brazil what they do to regulate the industry there. Go to the Gulf of Mexico to see what they do. The DPR is capable. They have professionals who can do their job well. Have you empowered them? Do you allow political expediency not to dictate the governance and the administrative setup of the industry? The DPR is still relevant because regulation is an important part to make competitive environment to work the way they are supposed to work. You cannot have a capitalist system without rule of law. And that's what DPR does by enforcing the regulations if they are allowed to do it effectively.
All right, Professor Ledare, well, thank you. My question actually, when I asked whether, DPR was still relevant, was not to say that, you leave the field entirely open to the players, without a regulator. But some of the issues you talked about now in terms of the provisions in the governance bill would tend to also buttress the fact that the DPR is in need of overhaul as well as grant of further autonomy and empowerment by the appropriate political authority. Let's bring in Mr. Akundaya back into the conversation. Mr. Akundaya, quite a number of issues on the plate now. Let's get your thoughts on each of these ones. Regulation, effective regulation of the industry, incentives to investors for proper gas utilization, as well as your take on whether or not the current regime of penalty for gas flaring has become anachronistic in view of the new gas policy.
Thank you. That's quite a plateful to go through. I would like to actually build on what Professor Eledare has said. The DPR is and has been doing a fantastic job for the autonomy they have been granted. The regulatory capture issue has been a problem for a while. It is the equivalent, I'd like to use Professor Ledere's analogy, it's equivalent of having a CBN as a branch of a larger bank. It is the equivalent of having the NCC as a department of one of the major telecoms industries. We need to move away from that to independently funded commissions with regulatory oversight. It's not so much what the entity is called, it is the powers and the autonomy that they are granted. In terms of the gas flaring penalty situation, the penalty is one aspect. Even if you were to enforce the penalty, even if you were to manage to make these companies pay the penalty, it is still going to be taken out of a pool. There's no value addition in terms of the gas utilization side. We need an environment whereby people are encouraged to make investment in the gas sector. Presently, we have too many conflicting aspects of our overall fiscal policy, monetary policy, all of that, that do not encourage gas development. We have been advocating this within the Industry Association, Nigeria LPGA, and others, Nigeria Gas Association as well, that one of the best ways to coordinate this is through a national champion. We got the most progress in terms of the LPG sector when there was a national champion under Alhaji Jafar Obaki as a special advisor to the presidency, because he could cut through all the issues, all the roadblocks that would invariably occur. You need somebody with high-level access who's an oversight chairman of these programs, of these policies. So if the government says, I want to reduce deforestation, I want to reduce flaring, I want to increase gas utilization, these are all laudable objectives, but they may have conflicting impacts on other policy documents, e.g. Tariffs, import duties, incentives, and so on. You need somebody who can identify all of this and say, look, in the broader objective, in the broader perspective of what we are trying to achieve for this nation, we must act on X or we must act on Y. For example, it astounded us in our industry, the LPG industry, that between 2009 and 2010, rather than reduce tariffs on certain equipment in terms of in our industry, it actually went up from 5% to 30%. How do you have that when you say that you are trying to achieve growth in the domestic sector? It simply doesn't tally.
Well, Mr. Kundayo, thank you very much. I mean, you and the other guests have spoken to very critical issues. I mean, one of the last points you just touched on now, has to be the need, for a better coordination of the various silos in which policies are being generated, either through the national planning or the national economic management team that actually has, a broad overview of these matters. And if you like, Blessing, yes, let's say a team of technocrats who remain within the system, notwithstanding whatever political changes occur, and thereafter, from time to time, would say if you're bringing a new policy idea, somebody will say, look, take this against the background of what went on before, take this against the background of what the Ministry of Finance or the Department of Petroleum Resources is seeking to do, and so on and so forth. Well, let's take this set of tweets, and then, of course, we'll bring the curtain down onto this conversation. Clifford Aguguese tweets, says we must learn from the saying, waste no waste, and make every effort to put our gas resources associated or not to profitable use.
Yes, we're talking about usage. There is a tweet from Egwando Tone Jeff. It's actually what you could say a hilarious one, but real sense to what is trying to put up. So the PIB bill, the petroleum industry bill, was sent to Senate when my sister was pregnant. Her daughter is now 10 years old, yet the bill is still not passed.
All right, so that's the way it goes. 10-year-old is probably getting ready for secondary school now, maybe September this year, yes, if not already in
if it's an extra brilliant child, she will be getting by now.
JSS 1. We hope that child will not graduate and the PIB bill will still be lingering in the National Assembly. Let's, of course, thank our guests who joined us for today's conversation from our Lagos Network studios. Professor Eledare is President of the Nigerian Association for Energy Economics. Professor Eledare, thank you very much, as well as Mr. Felix Kundayo, who is CEO of a gas company. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for your expertise and insights in our conversation this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we also would like to appreciate the CEO, Chief Operating Officer upstream of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, that's Malam Engineer Bello Rabiu. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so that does it now for our discussion segment. We move on now to sports, where there are stories concerning soccer. A friendly match, of course, was called off on account of pitch invasion. And from Miami, the Masters Open there, we have ageless Roger Federer strolling on the men's side, and Johanna Konta, the UK, also advancing on the women's side.
Numerous pitch invasions forced Monday's friendly between Ivory Coast and Senegal in Paris to be abandoned before full time.
With what is trending down the entertainment scene. The Lord, I join blessing of God. I appreciate you being with us this morning. See you again tomorrow, as he said. Enjoy the rest of your day.